It's Thursday, October 7th. Welcome to Real Talk. This episode is presented by our title sponsor, the team at Bitcoin Well. It was a huge week for them last week, recognized as one of Canada's top growing companies in the Globe and Mail's third annual business ranking. Bitcoin Well placed among the upper half of Canada's top growing companies for 2021, ranking 172 out of 448. Their spot secured based on 3-year revenue growth, totaling 254%. Pretty impressive stuff. We've told you before, Bitcoin Well is the world's first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company. I go to them to answer my questions. I talked to Benny at Bitcoin Well yesterday. What a beauty that guy is. Tell him Jespo sent you. He'll treat you all right. You'll find him under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
We've got a busy show coming up in about 10 minutes. Wendell Potter's going to join us. He's a reformed insurance propagandist. This guy's really got a remarkable story. His tweets are often like, for years, I'm paraphrasing, for years, I lied to you about the insurance industry. Now I'm coming clean, and here's why. He's one of those kind of guys. Years of experience behind the scenes. We're going to understand some of the nuanced differences between American and Canadian healthcare coverage, insurance, private coverage, public resources. I'm looking forward to getting into that a little later on in the show in about 40 minutes from now. David Thurton will join us from the Canadian Association of Black Journalists. This following... do I say a political leader? How do you want to describe Maxime Bernier? Can I say the guy that got his ass handed to him in the federal election? The joke that is Maxime Bernier, but there's nothing funny about what he's been putting out on social media, considering who takes Max's social media posts as God speak, right? He said it's time to play dirty with Canadian journalists, and people have, in droves, been turning out to hurl insults and threats at journalists, in particular, people of color, in particular, women of color. We're going to find out what's going on there with not just the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, but the Canadian Association of Journalists. That coming in about 40 minutes. And we continue what has been sort of I suppose, producer Sarah Hoyles, an unintentional but very enjoyable series of interviews with Canadian entertainment celebrities.
It was totally deliberate.
You just decided that this week we needed to check in with
Canadian Music Week.
We'll go with all the Canadian heavy hitters. So we've got Polaris Prize winner Cadence Weapon joins us earlier this week. We had, how cool was it yesterday to hang out with Biff Naked. And multiple Juno Award nominee, 2017 Juno Award winner. She's looking forward to the CCMAs. The Canadian Country Music Awards coming up. Jess Moskaluke will join us today in about an hour's time. Plus your emails and Eat Your Words. We've been looking forward to this edition for a while. Every Thursday, Eat Your Words presented by Prairie Catering. But we lead off with a story that's making news in our home city of Edmonton. It's making news across the country when it comes to football fans of the Canadian Football League. But you don't have to be a football fan to be intrigued by what happened to Eddie Steele. He won a university title in Manitoba. He's a Vanier Cup champion. He's a Grey Cup champion with Edmonton in 2015. Former defensive tackle granted an interview to well-known independent broadcaster Rod Peterson last Friday, coming up on a week ago. Took a few shots at the Edmonton Elks general manager. Next thing you know, Eddie Steele is fired from his radio gig. Joining us live, kicking off this morning's show. Eddie, it's good to have you here. Wish we had a different context. What the hell happened?
Yeah, it's good to be here with you. I appreciate the opportunity. Essentially, I just pointed the finger at Brock. The team on the field isn't producing. Obviously, they're last in the league right now. They're sitting at 2-5. But it goes beyond the field. We could name off solid 5 different situations that are just red flags surrounding this organization. And, being an analyst, I'm supposed to analyze things. And I voiced my opinion that this isn't just a lack of on-field product because they have good talent in terms of the players. But, you look at the Dwayne Mandrusiak, how that was handled, COVID. They've gone through 3 special teams coaches, lots of just turmoil amongst guys based off what I've heard. And I pointed the finger at the GM, and players get the finger pointed at them all the time. Why can't management get the finger pointed when in his tenure here, they've done nothing but get worse.
Yeah, I watched your interview, obviously, with Rod, and he asked you out of the gates. I guess you called what, like 5 games. This is your first year as a radio analyst, so you called. So and Rod says, "How are you liking the gig? How do you like being a radio analyst?" You say, "Well, I get to pick apart an organization and not catch any flack for it." And I went, "Oh, that part didn't age very well." But Eddie, I was talking to a few people in football and a few people in sports broadcasting yesterday. I can tell you that a couple people at major networks in Canada have been paying very close attention to this, and they were excited to hear that you were going to be doing this interview. They said you need to ask Eddie. It's one thing, I think, to be critical of an organization, especially as an alum like you, right? I mean, you won a championship with this organization. You've got credibility. You've been in that locker room. I would imagine you still have relationships with the players. But one broadcaster in particular said, well, what did Eddie expect? He was working on the team broadcast. You got to be kind of friendly to the team, especially the people at the top. What's the vibe like? What was the tone that they set? Were you expected to be a bit of a cheerleader?
You know what, Ryan? There was no vibe. There was no tone. They told me to be an analyst. They didn't tell me what I can and can't say. They didn't tell me what lines not to cross. And I'm not calling the organization out or Brock out because I have it out for him, or I have something against the organization. I love the team. And that's why I said what I said, is because I want them to get back to that rich tradition of winning. I won the last Grey Cup with them. I want them to win many more Grey Cups. So if I'm going to point out something that I see as an issue, well, I thought that was my job as an analyst. I realized, like with the partnership, that I guess I crossed the line, and I'm man enough to admit that. I've even said I would reach out to Brock and I would apologize to him for my mistake in saying what I said. But I do stand by what I said, because again, why can't someone have the arrow pointed at them when they're not doing their job up to snuff? The players, like I said, get it all the time. If quarterback's having a bad game or a couple of bad games, they'll bench him. Why can't we look at management the same way? It's no different. So yeah, I understand there's a partnership there, but I mean, a spade is a spade. And you look at how people are receiving this team right now in the community. I travel for work. I do a ton of traveling around the province, and people overwhelmingly are saying the exact same thing. What's going on with this team? They're losing us, as a fan base. And the on-field product speaks for itself. Record-wise, the numbers don't lie. They've gotten worse year after year after year since he's inherited the team. So why can't I point the finger where it needs to be pointed?
Eddie, one of the interesting things, and why I think that this interview and this story is going to appeal to more than just football fans, is that in your analysis of why this team is struggling, 2-5, lost 3 in a row. They've got a hell of a schedule coming up, including, due to some COVID complications with their schedule, their final week where they'll play 3 games in 7 days, which is virtually unprecedented in pro football. And you got to wonder about the toll that'll take on the bodies, the mentality of the athletes, and everything else. But you're not talking about a breakdown on the defensive line. You're not talking about wide receivers that can't catch the ball. You're not talking about a quarterback that showed up out of shape. You're talking about a breakdown of leadership. You say major division among the players that started with a COVID outbreak. Now, the general manager himself has insisted the reason he's not vaccinated is because he's received a medical exemption. I know there's some cynicism around that, but what have you heard directly from sources you trust, including within that locker room, about the impact of that COVID outbreak that really, really harmed the Edmonton Elks organization?
Yeah, it was a divisive time for sure for the locker room, because, obviously, just like the climate of society we're in right now, so many people have their opinions, and so many people are for, so many people are against. And just based off my knowledge of speaking to some guys in the locker room in that situation, it took a negative effect on the team, because ultimately it comes down to your money. And so say I'm a vaccinated player and my teammate's not vaccinated. Well, now we have to have this game rescheduled because the COVID outbreak, there was that huge issue, and you're ultimately costing me money now. They were fortunate that they were able to reschedule, and that's why they rescheduled and are doing 3 games in 7 days, which is nuts, but it's to make sure they get that game check. Had the league not been able to reschedule that game, they're out of a game check. And at that point, it gets real because now you're taking food off my family's plate because, your opinion on things. And it really, that's what it comes down to. So they're fortunate they get to get that game in. It's a crazy situation, but it comes down to money. And now, because of your opinions or lack of desire to get the vaccine, now you're going to be affecting my money potentially. And that's where we have a real big issue.
Are you still in touch with players? You have players that are sending you texts. You have players that are talking to you on or off the record, talking to you about what you alleged, which is major division in the locker room. That's tough for a fan to hear. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm not too far removed from the game. I retired a couple years ago, so I definitely still have some ears in the locker room and in many locker rooms because I have a lot of buddies who I played with.
One of the allegations made yesterday from longtime sports writer Robin Brownlee, I think, sent major waves across the country, in particular in Edmonton, when he alleged that, quote, what's the culture of an organization that fires a local employee like Dwayne Mandrusiak after 49 years, a longtime Eskimos trainer, never had a chance to, be part of the so-called rebranded Elks organization. But Dwayne had that 50th season looming, diagnosed with Parkinson's. But I can tell you, I played golf with Dwayne, shot an 80 after his diagnosis, after he was let go. So he's certainly physically capable. And then here it is from Robin Brownlee, and bans Joey Moss, probably the most beloved Edmontonian of all time, bans Joey Moss from the dressing room because it's been decided he became a distraction. Those decisions were made by Brock Sunderland, the GM of the team. Let's talk about that. Well, that thing went sort of nuclear. I think fair to say it prompted the Edmonton Elks organization to release a statement yesterday, and I think it's important that we point that out. A statement released from the family of Joey Moss at goelks.com, where they say, hey, listen, the Edmonton Elks always included Joey within the organization until the day he was no longer able to work. Let me say, Ryan Jesperson, may Joey rest in peace. The team says, by way of the family, the Elks continue to support Joey and his legacy. They have been an outstanding organization, says the Moss family, and have always treated Joey with the highest respect. That from Joey Moss's nephew, Adam Walker. What do you make of that whole thing? Is that legit?
Based off some of the conversations that I've had, because I golfed twice with Dwayne this summer too, and that guy can still swing it.
Sure can.
But, I'm not going to out anybody in this situation, but I do have it on good record that there was some sort of, maybe you won't say the word ban, but kind of keep him away from the locker room, so to speak. So I have heard that, absolutely. And I believe the person who told me that. And if you notice too, just with the statement that was put out, and I quickly read it yesterday when I was in the car, and I looked at some of the comments, and people were still lambasting them solely for the fact that they didn't actually address what they were being accused of, and that was not having him around the locker room. They said he was still a part of the organization, but they kind of skirted around addressing actually what people were saying was the issue.
So, Eddie, a lot of times, and I'm not sure the average fan knows this, and why would they? It's kind of the business side of broadcasting, but a team will buy a time slot, then the team owns the time slot, the team employs the broadcasters. I don't know how it works with the broadcaster that fired you. Happens to be the broadcaster that fired me too, 630 Ched. I don't know. Were you fired by Ched, by Chorus Entertainment, or were you fired by the Edmonton Elks?
I believe it was in tandem. I think the Elks made the phone call to say, get rid of this guy. And I guess Ched is the one who pulled the trigger, but the Elks are the one who ordered the hit. Were
you a little surprised that got you fired? I mean, I'll be honest, when I watched your interview with Rod Peterson, it had been described to me as you operating with a flamethrower. Quite frankly, I mean, aside from you using the GM's name, and I don't know how thin-skinned you have to be to hear your name and call for a guy's head on a platter, but were you surprised you got fired based on your comments?
Yeah, I was surprised. Part of me was expecting it just due to the fact that I realized I crossed the line with the partnership, but look, this was my first time ever doing this, and they just told me to be an analyst, and that's what I was doing. I was analyzing why I thought that there was some issues, and it's just not me spouting off at the mouth. Like I have a little bit of knowledge in this situation. So that's what I was doing. I offered to apologize. Brock didn't want any of that. And what's interesting too is I started kind of pointing the finger at Brock in the post-game show on Tuesday. And then I did Reed Wilkins' show on Thursday. And I brought it up to the line, and I towed the line. And then I did Rod Peterson's show. Rod Peterson's great at, getting people going. And I guess I crossed the line. And in all honesty, Ryan, like, I realize I crossed the line there, but at the same time, why can't people point the finger at management when the team is not having success? And it's not just success on the field, but it's organizational success. Why can't they be called out? Like I say, a quarterback, you're going to get benched if you're not playing good. Why can't we be critical of management as well? To me, that line, it almost doesn't make sense. And I get it's about partnerships and money, but like that just doesn't add up, because people need to be held accountable for their actions. And he's the general manager of a club. He's steering the ship, and the ship is going to go where he's steering it. And we're seeing where it's going right now. So I just simply pointed to that.
You heard from any other broadcasters? Anybody dangling a carrot in front of you, Eddie, since this all went sideways?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Could be good for business, pal. You never know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't close any doors right now. Hey, listen, I wish you well. I appreciate you speaking so candidly about it. I'm always sorry to see something like this happen, but I'll tell you what, buddy, when you speak truth, public's not stupid. Public knows what's up, right? And you'll be on the right side of history if that truth is, in fact, the truth. And if you believe that strongly, hey, I wish you well the rest of the journey. Thanks for doing the interview.
I appreciate the opportunity, Ryan.
You got it. This 2015 Grey Cup champ with the now Edmonton Elks, former defensive tackle Eddie Steele. Coming up in just a second, a reformed insurance propagandist. I've been looking forward to this conversation forever. Very quickly, want to let you know that our friends at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge, I talked to Scott over there. He says, oh my gosh, they are so relieved that I don't have to be telling you about how the inventory sucks, right? I mean, car dealerships, truck dealerships over the past, year and a half, due to a number of factors, including the Suez Canal debacle. And you remember that big storm that hit Texas, and microchips, they can't find them anywhere. It's meant you can't find trucks. Well, guess what? Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge has either already in stock or on trucks, on trailers on the way there, 335 Ram 1500s. Now that is selection. You're looking for Grand Cherokees, they got almost 150 of them coming. They've got more than 70 Wranglers, more than 50 Durangos, and more than 40 Gladiators. If you've been looking for a Ram truck, if you've been looking for one of those new releases on the Jeep lineup, look no further than Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. Also, big shout out to our friends of the Dairy Queens at Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. The beginning part of this month, Real Talkers. You can pick up 2 cheeseburgers for $5. You know, if you listen to this show, I'm encouraging you not to take advantage of that offer. Instead, pick up 2 double cheeseburgers for $7. Why would you buy singles for $5 when you can buy doubles for $7? Girl, you know it's true. Plus, coming up on Thursday, October 28th, it's Miracle Treat Day. All of their locations will be donating not the profits from Blizzard sales, the entire Blizzard sales, to the Stollery Children's Hospital. Those are the Dairy Queens at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. I've been following our next guest on Twitter for a while. I encourage you to do the same. At Wendell Potter, 20 years, a career as a corporate insurance executive, right up until he decided to blow the whistle on the health insurance industry. He now runs 2 nonprofits and a new coalition to bring a bipartisan focus on out-of-pocket healthcare costs in the United States. Also an expert in comparing and stacking up U.S. and Canadian health coverage, making his Real Talk debut. Wendell, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thanks for making time for us.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be with you, Ryan. Thank you very much.
I'll never forget the first tweet I saw from you. It was a while back before I started following you. You basically said something along the lines of, for years I lied to you about insurance and health coverage. Now I'm coming clean. I mean, what was that tipping point for you? When did your entire professional and personal life change?
It changed when I went back to visit family in Tennessee, where I grew up, a very conservative but a very poor part of the country. And I was living a very comfortable life and was well paid as a health insurance company executive. And I went back, and the hometown newspaper had a story about something called a healthcare expedition being staged as a pop-up clinic near where I grew up at a county fairground. I was curious. I went there, and I saw people were standing in lines that just stretched out of sight, and they were standing in the rain because it was raining that morning, but they weren't about to give up their place in line to get care that they otherwise couldn't afford. And I noticed that a lot of those lines led to barns and animal stalls on this county fairground site. And that did something to me. I realized that I was part of the problem and that I could have been one of those people had I not been lucky along the way, and that I had some responsibility for that scene and also for the perpetuation of an incredibly dysfunctional and unfair but very profitable healthcare system in this country.
Is this something? I mean, obviously, I'm asking you to speak in huge generalities, and so Wendell, you're the expert, not me. I'll let you know. You can get as specific as you like, but do you think that this is something that everybody or the majority of people working in the industry are aware of? I mean, how many people do you think? What percentage of people working in the industry are complicit here?
Most people in the industry are complicit. You can live a comfortable existence and keep a remove from people who really need care, and you become completely unaware. We don't have nearly enough media coverage of the problems that Americans are facing. So the work that I'm doing and will do for the rest of my life, if I'm able, is to try to make those people more aware and to step out and do what I did. I don't think many will, but there is complicity, and I was complicit, and I came to realize that, and I had a crisis of conscience, and there aren't many people who reach that point, unfortunately, because they can keep a distance from places like that county fairground.
You, back in 2008, I guess it was, you left a position, I would imagine a pretty high profile and probably a pretty well-compensated position as a head of communications for Cigna to testify before Congress on how insurers, quote, confuse their customers and dump the sick, all so they can satisfy their Wall Street investors. I mean, that's a hell of an allegation. I think we're more sensitive about it now than ever before, aren't we? In the midst of a pandemic, we see people struggling. Obviously, you know, you're speaking, Wendell, to a certain degree to a largely Canadian audience, so our entire context around this is going to be different. But why don't you take us into what that means for Americans, your fellow Americans, and then let's start stacking up the two systems against each other.
Well, we have one of the most unfair and expensive healthcare systems in the world. We pay more than twice as much as you all pay in Canada on a per capita basis for healthcare. And we do not have anywhere close to universal coverage, despite all that we spend. And I made sure members of Congress were aware of that. This was during the time that Congress was debating what became the Affordable Care Act. And I wanted to make sure that members of Congress heard something from an insurance company insider that they never heard from lobbyists. And the pandemic just really brought to the surface, more than I think anything in many years, just how unfair and inequitable our healthcare system is. Most Americans of working age get their coverage through their employer. But during the pandemic, millions and millions of Americans lost their jobs and their health insurance at the worst possible time. And that certainly contributed to our bad track record on COVID. We've now surpassed 700,000 deaths on a per capita basis. We've had far more cases and far more deaths than you have in any other developed country, for that matter. It just shows just how much further we have to go to try to fix this healthcare system of ours. What's
the messaging, like, generally speaking? I mean, as mentioned, you know, you were head of communications for these big corporations, for industry. When Americans are looking north at the Canadian system, and sort of the general understanding is that everything's free in Canada, what's the clap back? How is the Canadian system attacked, or at least criticized, by American insurance providers?
Well, and it was a big part of our overall and ongoing campaign to try to demonize the Canadian healthcare system in particular, because there are a lot of advocates in this country that really would like to see the U.S. adopt a system like you all have up there. We have a Medicare system, it just doesn't cover everybody. We would try to get people to believe that millions and millions of Canadians don't get the care that they need, that they're lying on gurneys in hospital corridors, that they have to wait and wait and wait for life-saving care. We would work with conservative advocates or advocates that took money from the industry in Canada to perpetuate those lies and to feed us information that presumably was an accurate picture of the Canadian healthcare system. I'm very ashamed of that. In fact, I did a tour of Canada in 2013 and 2014 to apologize to Canadians for the work that I did. And last year, I wrote a commentary for the Washington Post about how we did that and the consequences of those lies that I and many others told and still tell about the Canadian healthcare system.
What do you think? I mean, I guess we could probably, I would imagine you have a thesis. We could sit here for 3 hours. But when it comes to the impact of those lies, what were some of the notable ones?
Well, the notable ones was that the U.S. has the best healthcare system in the world, that we don't want to have a socialized medicine, as we would call any system that's not like ours. And as a consequence, people have bought into that. When you are able to conduct propaganda campaigns that go over decades, people believe it. Most Americans don't go to Canada or abroad. They just get their information from people like I used to be. And the media has been complicit because they have not done a very good job of dispelling these myths and misconceptions, these outright lies. So the consequence is people are dying or going bankrupt. One of the coalition that you mentioned that I had, a lot of people in this country with health insurance, millions and growing millions, have health insurance, but they can't use it because health insurance companies require them to pay so much out of their own pockets before their coverage kicks in that they're not able to pick up their prescriptions, they're not getting the care that they need. And if they have to have it, many of them wind up in medical debt they'll never pay off. Many go bankrupt, lose their homes, and many die, unfortunately. It's a lethal system that I trust that Canadians will understand that you do not want to have a system like ours. In fact, I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post a few years ago that warned Canadians about going down the slippery slope toward American-style healthcare.
Well, not just that, but it was right around that same time you said you were doing, My Words, Not Yours, this apology tour, this reconciliation tour, 2013, 2014, when at that time Canadian Prime Minister Harper was looking at options around privatizing portions of Canada's healthcare system. You flagged why the profit-focused American system had shortcomings. What do you think Canadians need to know? What would be the bullet points to focus on?
Well, during that time, Harper and some MPs were suggesting that you needed to have some elements of an American-style system, that you needed to have more choice and competition. Those were terms that I used to use. They resonate well, and that the free market can do a better job. But we've got decades and decades of empirical evidence that does not work. The free market does not work in healthcare like it does in other sectors of the economy. And in the U.S., it works the exact opposite. Private health insurance companies cannot control healthcare costs, nor do they have an incentive to do that, because as healthcare costs go up, as hospital prices, drug prices go up, what they're able to do is just jack up premiums and make people and employers pay more year after year. And then at the same time, on the other end, make them pay more out of their own pockets before their coverage will kick in. So it's a sweet deal for my former employers and the shareholders of these big companies. But the consequences are people, even with insurance, not being able to get the care that they need these days.
It's an interesting time to be talking to you, Wendell, because in particular in our jurisdiction in Alberta, right now we've got a premier whose recent polling numbers show that 6% of people polled strongly approve of his job performance. 61% strongly disapprove. Canadian forces, soldiers, have recently arrived in Alberta to assist with healthcare delivery. We have ICUs at capacity. We've had thousands of surgeries canceled. We've had children's hospital beds closed to accommodate growing ICUs. We're sending patients to other provinces for intensive care. It's an absolute disaster here. But you've tweeted how COVID has actually highlighted the strength of public health care in Canada. I shudder to think of what an American jurisdiction, if that's the case, would look like if we had our leadership in charge down there. But what has Canada gotten right?
Well, I think by having a system like you have, there's better coordination. There is the ability to allocate resources across provinces that we don't have in this country. No system is perfect, but you have states like where I grew up in Tennessee, where they recently have been this huge surge in COVID cases and deaths. It is those states that are hurting the most right now, that are more like some of the more conservative provinces of Canada, but far, far worse, because you've got this political and ideological divide. So many people have, frankly and unfortunately, bought into a lot of the propaganda and just resistance to efforts that the Biden administration is trying to promote and trying to implement. So that's a big part of the reason why we've done so much worse than you all have. You have the ability, because of your system, to do more coordination and allocate resources. You haven't done it perfectly. No country has, but no country should look to the U.S. as a model.
The pandemic, to a certain degree, as mentioned, in certain parts of the country, and you could say the same thing for the United States. I mean, you've said as much during this interview, Wendell, but the pandemic's been able to essentially run rampant. I don't know how else you describe it. I mean, people talk about a fire break right now, which would imply we're talking about a wildfire type scenario. It's certainly stressed our healthcare system. That's evident in a number of contexts. And a lot of people have speculated that it may be a tactic to build support for privatization in one context or another. We hear a lot of talk from elected officials about capacity. And I'd be curious for your insight into the power or the significance of that specific word, capacity. What does that do when you hear it?
Oh, it's one of the words that when you use that in particular, and some other words too, are key words that resonate with people on an emotional level. And that, by the way, is something that was very important to our work. We knew which words would resonate with people. Choice and competition, like I said before. Capacity is one that can signal that you all are not doing it right, that there is danger that if we get sick, if you get sick, you might not be able to get the care that you need. And that if you do something different, maybe like the Americans are doing, that will free up capacity. And they're dangerous words, but they're very carefully selected because, again, we didn't go out with any messaging that wasn't researched and message tested before we went out with them. We know what words work and how to use those words in a sentence or in context to scare the bejesus out of people.
Can you give us a couple more examples? I mean, are there other words top of mind that people should flag the minute that I love this, when people's bullshit detectors should just go off the chart the minute they hear that word? What are a couple other ones?
Well, socialism, and doesn't work as well in Canada probably as it does here. But Americans over generations have been spooked by that word in particular. The word choice, and I wrote a column for the New York Times about that last year as well too. That is a word that certainly Americans and people in all capitalistic countries find appealing and as a positive term. But it's Orwellian in the way it's used in this country to get people to think that they have choice. They don't in this country. If you get your coverage through the workplace, it is your employer that makes the choice as to what kind of health insurance you will have. And there is almost no competition that is meaningful in this country because you've got these enormous companies like I used to work for that really call the shots, these big insurance companies. But you want people to believe that there is real competition and that there is something sacred about competition. People believe that. They want to believe that. And when you use those terms in certain ways, you can get people to think that our system has some inherent advantages because of the way it's structured.
We hear that a lot in education too, right? You know, when you're talking about private schools and how private schools should be funded or not funded, the idea that competition, you know, sort of prompts everybody to rise to the occasion. It certainly is a talking point that we see recur. Keith is watching us live on YouTube. In our chat, he wonders, is there an incentive to bring innovation into a mixed system that still provides public care as the priority? He says maybe Germany is an example of surgery tourism.
I think there absolutely is something to that. One that reminds me that one of the things that we would say is that if you change our system, if you do anything that might get us closer to your system or a system in Europe, we would be stifling innovation. So that is a term to be aware of. You'll hear that if you do this or that, you'll be stifling innovation and resources will dry up for development of new drugs or new technology. It's bogus. You can have both. You can have more publicly funded healthcare, but also private sector involvement and investment. So know that it is possible. There is a lot of tourism around the world. A lot of Americans, by the way, go abroad to get care that they need, even if they have insurance. Hundreds of thousands of Americans go south of the border to get dental care at some border towns because it's cheaper there. People fly to Asia and the Caribbean and pay less when you even factor in flights and very nice accommodations to get the care that they need, and it's good quality care. So that's what people with money and the means to do it are doing in this country.
And Wendell, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, I want to lay my cards on the table. What kind of host am I if I ask the guests to come here and participate in Real Talk, and I don't do the same thing myself? I have often, I am open-minded. You're more of an expert than me, but I am open-minded to a system of delivery where people could pay out of pocket for certain services and, in my mind, help fund public services, however that's structured, clear up spots in the queue, shorten waiting lists. You're right. I mean, people go to Mexico for dental surgeries. People fly to Turkey for hair plugs. I mean, people are going all over the place for these surgeries, and I've seen people say, why doesn't it make more sense to allow that industry to operate here while still protecting the sanctity of a public system? Do you think it's possible?
I'm not sure. It's possible it could be pulled off, but I'm skeptical that it can be. You have a system, at least theoretically, and I hope in practice, that every Canadian, regardless of ability of their financial situation, can get access to good quality care. We don't have that in this country. We ration care in this country on the ability to pay for it. We have a lot of concierge practices, physicians who don't take private insurance. They just cater to those who are able to spend a set amount of money every month to have access to a primary care physician or a specialist. It has created one of the most unequal systems. There might be a way that you could bring that element into your system. It would have to be done with extraordinary care to keep it from, again, I use the word slippery slope, which, by the way, is a term that I used to use. We don't want to go down the slippery slope toward Canadian-style healthcare or toward socialized medicine. That's another term that you need to be mindful of.
You know what? One of the things I think we can be guilty of is we say these things and then we just assume there's an understanding of it, when sometimes I think it's important to clarify. So when we say, a slippery slope toward Canadian-style healthcare, what's the implication there? Because I would imagine that for the millions of Americans that are without any health coverage, I mean, I remember hearing, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that, going to a hospital to have a baby can cost people like 10 grand. I know that, heart surgeries can be 300 grand. I mean, people get wiped out. What's the perception of what Canadian style healthcare means, that everybody can get care? Is that what we're talking about?
No, it's not the perception that most of us have, or many of us have. Maybe it's not quite as bad as it used to be. But there is a perception that if you are seriously ill and need some life-saving procedure, you might have to wait months for it. They conflate that with waiting for a knee replacement or something like that is elective but not life-threatening. There are Americans who wait forever and never get a knee replacement or a hip replacement because they don't have any money or enough money to pay for it. My daughter-in-law told me the other day, they have insurance. She and my son have insurance, but they had to spend so much out of their own pockets. And this is typical, that my 2-year-old, my grandson just turned 2 in August. She just finished paying off the medical bills for his delivery, and she has health insurance. So the slippery slope is trying to persuade people that We've got it better than anybody else does. You don't want to slide down. I mean, that creates a visual image in people's minds of sliding down into something that's a pit or something that is bad that we don't want to slide into.
If you're just tuning in, streaming us live on the Mixlr audio app, we're talking to Wendell Potter, a self-described reformed insurance propagandist. I love seeing this, Wendell. It's the families gathered around the screen, I think, in the Cannon household. Lisa Cannon says, my daughter is quite intrigued by this discussion. She's currently studying to get her master's in public health. I want to ask a question for Lisa's daughter, and I'm curious about this too. What does the future look like? I mean, yeah, okay, let's talk, rosy glasses, clear blue skies, utopia style scenario. What is perfect, or as close to perfect as we can get, healthcare delivery, including insurance coverage, look like?
There's a set of principles. And in this country, I have advocated for a Canadian-style healthcare system, or a single-payer system, as we often call it down here. But ultimately, what we need is a system of universal coverage in which everyone, like I said earlier, has equal access to life-saving care. It might be possible for things that are elective, and I think that's something that's worthy of debate. Things that are elective, maybe there could be a private market for some of that. But you also need to have some mechanism that is far better than what we have, closer to what you do, that controls healthcare costs in some meaningful way. You cannot let and believe that the private sector will do that, because they have pressure from shareholders to do the exact opposite. One of my jobs was to handle financial communications from Cigna. I had to know how the company made money, where it came from, what they did with it, what their business practices were. So I had a front row seat and was a participant in that. But you also need to have the assurance that the care that is available to everyone is quality care. Nobody's done it right. No one has done it perfectly. You all have done it much better than we have. You need to do more. You need to have better access to dental care and pharmacy benefits and long-term care. There are shortcomings in every system. No system has got it perfectly. It has got it right completely. But I think that we can look at other countries that have done better than you guys have done. The Commonwealth Fund, based in New York, does an analysis of the performance of healthcare systems around the world every couple of years. They just released their most recent research. And once again, of the 11 countries that they survey, the United States comes in dead last on almost every metric. It varies from year to year which country comes out best. And frankly, it's usually a European country that ranks near the top.
Did you face significant blowback when it came to blowing that whistle, when it came to speaking out against obviously a hugely profitable and influential industry?
I did, not as much as I was fearing. My fear almost kept me from doing that, because I was a part of efforts to discredit the industry's critics. So I did this going into that with expecting a worst case scenario. I think I was lucky for two or three reasons. One, I testified before Congress several times, so I had that going for me. I always spoke the truth. I wasn't doing anything like the Facebook whistleblower that was targeting one specific company. I was talking about industry-wide business practices. And I also worked day in and day out with the media. I had a lot of people. There were a lot of people in the media that I knew that I developed relationships with. So the industry had a hard time targeting me for retaliation. And fortunately, I've been able to use the platform that I was able to create with that testimony to keep going. And the industry has not figured out how to shut me up yet.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating stuff. Obviously, you've got a wealth of experience. I love how you put it out there for people to understand. I encourage everybody to follow you on Twitter at Wendell Potter. People can read your book, Deadly Spin. An insurance company insider speaks out on how corporate PR is killing healthcare and deceiving Americans. Our guest now running two nonprofits, the Center for Health and Democracy and Business Leaders for Healthcare Transformation. Also, this new coalition, Loop Now, that's Lower Out of Pockets Now Coalition. Wendell Potter, thanks for making time for us.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Really appreciate it. Fascinating. Hey, the differences between ourselves and our American neighbors. And I think that there's room for debate on how healthcare needs to evolve. I love that he acknowledges Canada doesn't get a pass. There's still a lot of work to do. I think most Canadians know that. You look at politicians, you look at what they're willing to wade into, and then where they get sort of nervous around talk like dental care, pharmacare. I mean, how is dental care not covered? You ask dentists. Obviously, they have a self-interest here, but I have no reason not to believe dentists that make the point that dental health is overall health, right? They can make direct correlations to plaque on your teeth and heart disease. How is dental care not covered? Did something on that resonate with you? I could tell your body language was you were all over that.
I read an article years ago, and it was a really good analysis about how one of the biggest shortcomings in our healthcare system is the lack of dental care, because when we talk about people that are marginalized, that don't have insurance, that can't afford even just to pay out of pocket of dental care, they're one of the largest groups of people that is showing up in ERs. And so if you want to take, that one piece of pressure off of our hospital system, include dental care as part of our healthcare system. It's a very easy fix.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see where that goes over the next 10 years or so. I mean, a big part of it is what the electorate demands, right? What people want.
I mean, it's not lost on me that we just had a federal election, and in it there were some parties that were calling for, nationalized pharmacare and dental plans to make sure that type of care is included. Also, calls that the healthcare system needs more funding. That yes, it is. We do have a nationalized program, but it needs more funding.
And now, I mean, if that's what you're looking for, if pharmacare is one of your priorities, as an example, this most recent election outcome is good news for you. You want a minority government. You want a minority Liberal government that needs Jagmeet Singh's NDP to prop them up and pass things in the House.
Because NDP calling for pharmacare.
That's maybe what it could be. It could be pharmacare that the NDP has the biggest influence on, if they so choose. That could be it.
I also really appreciated the, flagging certain language, what words to. I love what you called it. Yeah, the bullshit meter. So we're talking about capacity.
Yeah,
that's a red flag.
A flag word. We always that's a question we should ask all the insiders. What are the words we should be paying attention to? That's why you got to pay attention to Real Talk. Hey, listen, we're really excited to have every month moving forward a wine sponsor here on the show. And this month, our wine sponsor is La Crema. La Crema, I've been enjoying a few bottles. Not going to lie to you. I told you right now, I mean, if you love wine, I'm never going to be talking about a wine that sucks, ever. Every single wine you're going to hear about here, I have quality tested. That is what I am willing to do for you, Real Talkers. I am willing to quality test these wines.
You're so selfless.
You know what? That is what I'm when I show up here to work every single day. I should be honest, I'm not quality testing the wines before the shows, although maybe on Fridays that could be a thing. Probably whites in the morning and then reds into the afternoon. But in all seriousness, La Crema, it was they're fabulous, but you know what else caught my attention? If you're a discerning buyer, if you're a discerning connoisseur, their commitment to land stewardship. You can learn more on their website. Carbon farming. They're powered by solar energy at the vineyard. They're running on Tesla batteries. I mean, it's super cool how they've been taking this reputable vineyard all the way into, essentially the realm what the next gen of wine drinkers are looking for. I personally recommend the brand new La Crema Russian River Pinot Noir. It's fantastic. You can pick it up anywhere you find fine wines, and if you don't see it in your favorite store, ask them for La Crema. Let them know that you heard it right here on Real Talk.
The following paid advertisement does not necessarily represent the views of Ryan Jesperson, Real Talk, or Relay Communications Group Incorporated. It's time for a fresh perspective. Edmonton deserves a leader who will work for you and with you. Someone who understands the strengths of our community to do things better and faster. Cheryl Watson has built her career on results, not promises. On October 18th, vote Watson for mayor, and together, let's build a city that works. This ad is paid for by the Watson for Mayor campaign.
This is a story that, we wish we didn't have to talk about. We wish that this wasn't happening. But you know what? This is an ugly reality. We know that racism has plagued society probably since inception. I mean, how far do you want to go back? But when it infuses itself into certain industries, into politics, into journalism, that's when it demands our attention, most especially right now after a Canadian political leader, shut out in the federal election, but still the leader of the People's Party of Canada, Maxime Bernier, the other day tweeted this. He called for Canadians, he called for his fans to play dirty. Said Maxime Bernier, if you want to write to these idiots to tell them what you think of their disgusting smear jobs, here are their email addresses. Classy, Max. He says they want to play dirty. We will play dirty too. Now, this isn't going to be a segment on how Maxime Bernier is a stain on the Canadian political landscape, but we are going to have a conversation about what this has meant for journalists, in particular Black, Indigenous, people of color, and in particular women. I'm grateful that David Thurton's agreed to join us, a national reporter in CBC's Parliamentary Bureau, a board member with the Canadian Association of Black Journalists. David, thanks for making time for us today, and welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here.
What does that do to you? With regards to a visceral reaction to see that tweet from Maxime Bernier?
Yeah, well, I should just say that I haven't been personally targeted, either in the past or, recently by these barrage of messages, thankfully. As you mentioned in your intro, this is predominantly a thing that particularly affects female journalists of color and also gender diverse journalists as well. But, just to see and to hear the stories that they've been sharing over the last couple of days, it breaks my heart. It's tough to see the messages that they're receiving, and they've been posting them very publicly on social media. I could just read some of them for you. Some of them aren't fit for any broadcast, including yours. One journalist was told, I hope propagandists like you get brutally raped. Another was called the N-word. Her messages were laced with the N-word. And she was told to go back to Monkeyland, wherever that is. So just, profane messages filled with racism, with hate, with misogyny, with Islamophobia. And, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, Ryan.
So this has prompted, the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, and for that matter, the Canadian Association of Journalists, to step forward and talk about, I suppose, what you'd call an action plan. How do you begin? Yourself as a spokesperson here, a representative for the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, how do you begin to address something like this?
Well, it's important to mention that this really isn't new. This has been happening for years. It's just been coming to the forefront because of, as you said, as you read, Maxime Bernier's tweet calling out those journalists, calling on people to play dirty with them. So, we've been, calling for a number of years for journalism organizations and newsrooms to make sure that their newsrooms are places where journalists of color, Indigenous journalists, feel safe and feel protected and feel that they can be their authentic and true selves and not have their dignity and their humanity, ripped apart to shreds every single day. So I think newsrooms are coming to that realization now. We not only put out that statement, the Canadian Association of Journalists, CAJ, one of our sibling organizations, also has put out a statement. They were quick on the heels of that. I see you showing Fatima Syed. She's one of their board members, one of her tweets as well, calling for action. And recently we've seen, a consortium of a lot of newsrooms, including my own organization, CBC, basically say that, we will not tolerate this. So that is very good to see. That is very positive to see. We are happy to see that. But of course, that's not enough. We're hoping and we're calling on newsroom managers to go and to do more, to really respond in meaningful ways. And from our point of view at the CABJ, the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, we feel it comes back to, the calls to action that we released, almost 2 years ago. Which is basically, hire more journalists of color, hire more Indigenous journalists, not just make sure that, they're pretty faces on air, but they're also in management positions, because we tend to see that when journalists of color, Indigenous journalists have leadership roles, they are more sensitive to these issues. They respond better to these issues. Also, as well, just putting in basic privacy and security measures, making sure that there's security audits that are done with your staff, especially staff that is, highly exposed, whose bylines are appearing online, who tend to cover these stories on a regular basis, making sure that, it is not easy for them to get doxxed that quickly. And when they do get doxxed, when their personal information is shared online like that, also just making sure that the support is in place there, that you have security teams that are going in and making sure that other things have not been compromised, and these threats that are online don't escalate and spill into the real world. Well, and of course, there's a role for social media sites to play as well.
And I want to ask you about that, David, in just a second. But you're right. You talk about real world implications. I mean, I can think of a couple of examples, even throughout this pandemic. Young journalists from a couple of different outlets in Alberta doing a hell of a job, bright futures ahead of them, talented storytellers. I'm thinking of two women in particular that were all but swarmed at, news events that they were assigned to cover. One of them in particular, a church that continued to gather, defying public health orders. A fence went up. The RCMP are there. There's the journalist. That's a story. That is story worthy. That's the exact type of story that needs to be told. The public needs to understand that. The threats or the implied threats or the intimidation that journalist received and was subjected to, of course, they kept their cameras rolling the whole time. And I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of people. But at the same time, I'm watching that. My blood is boiling. I'm wondering what that's doing for every journalist in Canada, let alone women of color, let alone black women. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this could have a serious impact on the profession. And when the profession is hurt, the public is hurt.
Yeah, I think our biggest fear is that this not only has a chilling effect on journalists, but it will cause some journalists to leave the profession. To just frankly say, Ryan, that this isn't worth it. My own dignity, my own sanity isn't worth it. And we've already seen this already. We've seen journalists like Supriya Dwivedi, a popular talk show host who worked for Global News, who basically called it quits and said that, she cannot put up with the barrage of online hate that she's receiving when she calls out her fellow hosts and fact checks them on basic things when it comes to, racism and their comments about the Islamic and Sikh communities and stuff like that. So, and we know that she's not the only one. We've seen the journalists who have been targeted over the last couple of days who basically had to, say that this will not deter them, but they worry about what impact this is going to have on journalists who are of a younger generation, who are much younger, who are probably wondering if this is worth it, if this is what I have to deal with. It's so hard already just, to tell the story in our profession because of, various constraints, whether it's, money or the precarious employment. Now you have to deal with this harassment that seems to be getting worse online.
What do you think would represent meaningful action? Like, it's one thing to say, and David, I'm not minimalizing, these action plans, the statements that this will not stand. I mean, that's important. But when you're talking about a certain element of the population that, using Bernier's words himself, let's play dirty, an element of the population that may have no shame, quite frankly, that doesn't respect the profession, that may not respect barriers and, protocols around how you treat one another. I mean, are we talking about, journalists perhaps being, or agencies, outlets being more proactive with regards to filing police reports? Are we talking about, would you like to see arrests for harassment, for threats? I mean, how would you like to see this play out so that people can actually, in particular, journalists can feel safe doing their jobs?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the statements that we're seeing, including from our organization, including from the consortium of newsrooms that we just saw this week, they aren't enough. They cannot stop there. we need to take meaningful action. So as I mentioned, there's a role for newsrooms to support employees and to be proactive with employees who are in the line of fire. I also think newsrooms need to be quite explicit and let their journalists know that you have the right to not be online, to not be a social media personality. I think once upon a time, and still in this time, we have a lot of newsrooms who are saying that this is part of your job. You need to have a Twitter profile. You need to have an Instagram profile. You need to be out online and engaging and doing all that stuff. I think newsrooms need to reevaluate that approach. They need to make sure that they're explicit with their employees, that if this is something that you aren't willing to do, if this is something that you feel that this is, that you can't handle, you don't need to have a Twitter profile. You don't need to be on Instagram. Having said that, there are a lot of journalists who are freelancers, who are, doing startups, who are doing their own thing, who can't afford to take those measures. The only way to get their content is by having that online presence, by, exposing themselves and to dealing with all the crap that you get online. So I think it's incumbent upon news organizations to not only protect their employees, but also to push the social media companies to take action. I mean, look at Bernier's tweet, for example. What repercussions did he face? Was a 12-hour suspension, putting his account in a read-only mode, was that a sufficient response to what he did, to breaking the terms of use of that social media platform, for violating those rules, for creating this whole barrage of hateful, Islamophobic, racist comments to come at these reporters. So I think there definitely needs to be a conversation about what newsrooms, what outlets, what journalists are doing to push social media companies to live up to their promises, to live up to their commitments, which we've been seeing over the last couple of years, to rid their platforms of hate, to rid their platforms of racism and, white supremacists.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm curious to know if you see a role for the federal government in this.
Yeah. You know what? I think most journalism advocacy organizations, including the CABJ, would agree that there is a role for the federal government to play in this space. What specifically that is, I think we're all just trying to wrap our heads around it. I know our sibling organization, the CAJ, the Canadian Association of Journalists, is right now trying to come up with some sort of position paper on it. We are working with them on that, but it's difficult to say what that should be because there are all sorts of questions that would arise from that. If you're it's one thing to crack down on hate speech, but there are implications for free speech. So there are all sorts of details that we need to work out. So I would just say that there is. So I would say, almost unanimous agreement among advocacy organizations and newsrooms that the federal government, Ottawa, needs to play a bigger role. It has said, the new Liberal government that was reelected, that they do intend to bring forth legislation to regulate social media platforms, not just their content, but also the hate speech that's on there. We need to see the details on that. We need to be a part of those consultations. So, I don't really have an answer to your question about what specifically that looks like, but we are unanimous that something needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think we could all agree that a lot of times, the significant element, at least in early stages, is that a federal government is acknowledging something and addressing something and making it part of public dialogue. I suspect that you've got an assignment today. I suspect you've got a story to file, so I won't keep you much longer, David. But let me ask,
just say,
of course, yeah, and I want to give you a chance to wrap here. But I think probably one of the most important questions is, what can the public do? I mean, thousands of people hear this today. What can the public do?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the public needs to push the social media platforms to do better. They are your customer. We are their customers, right? We are their product, and we have a huge and a large voice to play in this. I also think the public can do a lot more in pushing news organizations to cover this story better. to, email and let newsrooms know that, that this is an important story, that we need to do a better job covering hate. We need to do a better job covering white supremacist groups. I mean, one of the journalists that I was speaking to was targeted, was saying that, journalists have to take responsibility and newsrooms have to take responsibility for the role that we've played in normalizing political parties like the People's Party of Canada and Maxime Bernier. This is a party that doesn't play by the normal rules of the political landscape here in Canada, yet we tend to cover them as if they're a normal party, that journalist was saying. And so we need to evaluate how we're covering Maxime Bernier, how we're covering the PPC, a party that has had known links, according to the Anti-Hate Network, to white supremacist group, to far-right organizations. And perhaps this problem that we're encountering as journalists with being targeted as hate is one of our own making, because we have normalized these political groups that are associated with the far right. So there's also a role for the public to play, but there's also a role for journalism organizations to play in how we cover this, which you're doing today.
That's a really interesting point you just made. We've had these conversations over the past couple of months. It was John Ibbotson, wasn't it, that wrote the column, I think, that was talking about how you shouldn't write. Yeah, it was, right, David? That he was.
Yeah,
I think it was.
It was
before the election. Yeah, Globe Mail. You shouldn't write off the party, and the party shouldn't be sort of like brushed off and treated like a non-entity because. And then I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was this, maybe you could track it down, sir. There was like this ominous statement he made where, if we force them out, then maybe we find out what happens. There was some really sort of an ominous, strange line to be included. And I remember that following a lot of public backlash when that column came out, they had sent it back to the editors and they had included a line that said something like, which is racist. Like they sort of put in a caveat, but didn't change the tone of the article. And a lot of people, including guests on this program, have taken issue with it. That I think deserves more of our consideration.
No, 100%. The way that we cover these parties really the media needs to take a hard look at the way that we are covering these parties and making sure that these are parties that don't play by the same rules that the Liberals and the NDP and the Conservatives play by. And so we need to be careful with the way that we're covering them.
David Thurton, a national reporter in the Parliamentary Bureau with the CBC. For those outside the industry, that's about as big shot as it gets. He's also a board member with the Canadian Association of Black Journalists, doing a hell of a job. Really appreciate your candor on the show this morning, your availability as well, David. Thank you for this.
Anytime.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point that he makes. Around coverage of the PPC and in my former employ on a terrestrial radio station that has a lot of PPC supporters tuning in, I would take big swipes at that party because I believe that they deserve them and I believe that they're important. But you don't write off the party. It's not a joke. It's far from a joke. As a matter of fact, it's a real problem. But like David said, they do not deserve, nor should they be looped in discussion along with the New Democrats and the Liberals and the Conservatives and even the Greens. This is in the Maverick Party too. I suppose we could sort of figure out where the Maverick Party fits into all of this. I don't know if technically that would qualify here, but there are. What I want to acknowledge is that there are a lot of different political parties and political movements in Canada, many more, but they do not all, like he said, play by the same rules. I mean, it's very rare. For obvious reasons, because it's deplorable, to see the leader of a political party saying, talking about journalists saying, if they want to play dirty, we'll play dirty too. Like, what are you, in grade 9? Like, are you the schoolyard bully? Are you the mean girl? Maxime Bernier, like, what the hell is that? If you'll play dirty too? You want people to take you seriously? I mean, every political leader that hits a campaign trail that tries to fill a slate, 338 candidates across the country in a federal election, is essentially auditioning for the job of prime minister. That's essentially what they're doing. Now, it's the longest of shots for Maxime Bernier, who's still quite likely bitter that he just barely lost that Conservative leadership race to Andrew Scheer. Can you imagine? I mean, we've talked about this a lot. What the Conservative Party might look like had Maxime Bernier achieved another 0.5 percentage point during that leadership race. Now, I do have my theories that I think he is a political opportunist, and I think like of the slimiest variety, in the sense that you see this element of the population that doesn't believe science, that would malign healthcare workers, that would throw rocks at political candidates they don't agree with, that would protest outside hospitals, that would protest outside schools, that would smear and threaten Muslim and Black and Jewish and Indigenous and other reporters, female reporters. I mean, this is essentially, and quite frankly, I don't care if people come at me for this statement. This is the PPC base. I am describing the PPC base. I've said this before. I mean, if you support this party, you're either ignorant or disgusting. You either are disgusting or you don't recognize how bad that party is. So you're ignorant. There's one of two choices. You can't be the type of person that says, I don't love what they say about hijabi women, but like I'm a free market capitalist, so I'm voting for the PPC. This is something where I think programs like this need to take a strong stance, and we don't want to put this on the targets of this hate and this discrimination. Why is it up to, it's worth mentioning, we reached out to Fatima Syed, who was in touch with us, appreciated the invitation, was unable to be available here today, but why is it up to Fatima Syed, or why is it up to Tanya Hales, or why is it up to these other journalists to step forward, to be taking these on the chin, and to be speaking out about the impact that this racism has on their lives? We talked about Edmonton Oiler Ethan Bear the other day. Why is it up to Ethan Bear to have to talk publicly about the racism he faces as an Indigenous hockey player? It's up to every single one of us, including people in positions of privilege with impactful platforms like this one. And so we'll continue to have these conversations, and we'll continue to ask you for your thoughts on this. Maybe not right this minute. We've got a bunch of people chiming in on the live chat, and I appreciate it. But if you need a minute, if this is something you're going to walk with today, if your heart's heavy or if your heart is troubled, as they say, then you need to take some time, and ultimately you want to put this into an email. We would love to hear from you. talk@ryanjesperson.com is where you can be in touch with the show. Our friends at Eden Landscaping know that the seasonal change might mean a change in perspective for your outdoor space. As the snow starts to fall, away go all of your worries. I'm describing myself again. My lawn looked really, really, really bad this year. It's just a combination of dogs and drought and maybe a bit of neglect on my part. But then the snow falls and everything looks great. I've got the white twinkly lights and the snow's there and everything looks fine, but I know what's going to happen in the spring. It's going to look lousy again. It's why it's a great time to talk to Mike and the team at Eden Landscaping about bringing your outdoor space to life. You've got the luxury of time now. Why not use these fall, winter, and early spring months to work with Eden Landscaping to design a space that you can truly be proud of and enjoy? They've got more than 20 years experience and a whole bunch of return customers. Mike says he's most proud of their referrals, people giving their stamp of approval, saying it was worth it. You can find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca. Our friends at Jet Set Parking want to remind you that if you're going to be heading to a sunnier or warmer locale, if you're ready for a dose of sunshine, why not choose non-stop service from our home city, Edmonton, to Montego Bay this winter? You've been thinking about Montego Bay, but you got to route through Toronto, you got to route through Vancouver, you got to lay over in Dallas. Non-stop from Edmonton to Montego Bay this winter out of Edmonton International Airport. While you're there, why not park your money in the bank and park your car at Jet Set? If you go to jetsetparking.com right now, not just for this Montego Bay flight, for any travel before the end of 2022, not the end of 2021, 2022, you can park for $8 a day. That's like a venti latte a day. $8 to leave your car in Jet Set Parking at EIA. You can book online at jetsetparking.com. Make sure you use the promo code REALTALK to get that $8 deal. Jet Set Parking is locally owned, and you'll love them. I guarantee it. I'm excited about this next interview. I've never had a chance to talk to this Canadian country singer, a multiple Juno Award nominee, a Juno Award winner for Country Album of the Year in 2017. She is a 3-time consecutive Canadian Country Music Association recipient for Female Artist of the Year. She's got a whole bunch of nominations coming up November 29th, including Female Artist of the Year, Video of the Year, and the coveted Album of the Year. It is Jess Moskaluke making her Real Talk debut. Thanks for making time for us, and welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. I know a lot of people are excited. You've got a show coming up October 9th, just a couple of days from now, in our neck of the woods in Atchison, Alberta. Where do we find you today? Are you on the road? Are you getting a few days off tour at home?
Yeah, no, I'm at home right now. It's been kind of a crazy time. My schedule is spotty. We'll have a ton of shows within a weekend or two, and then like nothing for a bit. So you caught me at home today, which is perfect and sort of distracting because your producers saw my dogs running around in the background earlier. So
well, the show is very dog friendly. So if the dogs want to introduce themselves, we're cool with that too. You can learn a lot about somebody by the company they keep. I'm talking about house pets. I'm talking about pets and family members. What kind of dogs do you have?
I have 2 rescue dogs. We think one's a corgi and the other one's probably like a Jack Russell. I hope you don't learn a lot because my dogs are not very well trained and like kind of impolite, but they're very friendly.
hey, the Queen of England has corgis, so there you go. You're in esteemed company. and I've always thought the Jack Russells are a riot. That's like the smallest package and the biggest personality, right? Absolutely amazing. You know, it's kind of a different context, isn't it? We talked to Biff Naked. She was on the road yesterday. We talked to Cadence Weapon. He just won the Polaris Music Prize. He was in New York City on tour right now. Typically, you might talk to an entertainer, a touring one like yourself, and say, how good does it feel to be home? But have you been itching to get out on the road? I mean, it's totally different these days considering the pandemic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's been really nice to be home. I don't want to downplay any of the negative effects of the pandemic in any way. But, you know, in the beginning, it felt really great to just kind of be home and spend some time with my family and my husband and friends and sleep in my own bed. But I'm ready to get back on the road. That's for sure.
What sort of an impact did the last year and a half or so have on your career? I mean, was it demonstrable? Did it mean more time in the studio, more time writing? How did it impact you in a real way?
A lot of people think that it would mean more time in the studio and more time writing, but that's actually been a lot more difficult than one would think because, again, we couldn't get into rooms with each other for a lot of the last year and a half. So it was a lot of Zoom writes. And for some people that works, but for me, I lose an energy that way. So I feel like I really need to be physically in the room with a person, not to mention there's delays and lags and things like that. So you can't sing or play anything actually together. So sometimes you could almost be writing 2 different songs on the same write. So it's a little bit difficult. So it's kind of hard to know what effect the pandemic has had on my career fully, because I think we'll only see it when we come out the other side. But I mean, I did release an album somehow, some way. So that's been really great. I'm really proud of that. Yeah,
as you should be. And it's got to be exciting to see. I mean, you're nominated for Album of the Year. The CCMA is coming up November 29th, along with Female Artist of the Year, Songwriter of the Year, Video of the Year. I mean, you're pretty much ticking all the boxes. How does that make an artist like yourself feel, these nominations?
Oh man, every single time it happens, it never gets old. I can truly and honestly say that. But there was something about this time that my team and I had agreed that felt a little bit more special. And I think it's because usually we gauge our successes by, you know, playing shows to crowds and seeing how they react and speaking to people in person. And like, we didn't get to do that. So knowing that our peers can recognize our hard work and sorry about the dog squeaking in the background.
Don't ever apologize. We love that stuff.
They're squeaking because they like the record too. They're just sick of hearing it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now you're a Canadian country music star, obviously, but within Canada, I know there's a lot of pride as well when it comes to the regions, you know, to the provinces. Are you a Canadian country star first, or does it get a little bit more specific?
I mean, I like to even go more ambiguous than that. I mean, I wouldn't use the word star for myself, but I always just say I'm a country music artist. But, you know, it depends on where you're at. I'm really proud to be from Saskatchewan. And even more than that, I'm really proud to be from Langenburg/Rocanville, Saskatchewan. So, you know, it's all good.
Can I ask, I don't know the story of how you first got your break. I know that there are so many talented artists out there. I mean, we all know, you know more than us, I guarantee it. People where you read their lyrics, or you'll see them play, or you hear their voice for the first time and you get chills, and nobody knows their name. And very few people will know their name. And then there are people like you that at a relatively speaking, I wish you many decades of success. Let's say you're relatively early in your career. The trophy case is starting to fill up. You're a household name when it comes to country music. A lot of people are going to be showing up, I know, excited to see you play in a couple of days from now. What's the difference? How did your break happen?
I mean, I guess the easiest way to answer this question, I don't know that there was ever like a break where it was an overnight thing, but I think that the main way that I actually got my popularity in music and my chance was that I actually started putting out both cover videos as well as some of my own songs that I had just started to write. I was putting them out on YouTube, like 10 or more years ago already now. And those kind of just started to blow up, where they would have hundreds of thousands of views. Some of them had millions of views. And all of a sudden my phone was kind of ringing, and I was getting to play shows, and record labels were calling, and I eventually signed a record label, and I'm still with that company today. So things just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, industry's changed a lot over the years. Did you have did your career start, would you say, at right around the time that the so-called digital or streaming type reality was already manifested, or were you part of that transition? I'm always fascinated. We talked to Tom Cochran a while ago. It was fascinating to get his take on how much the industry has changed, not just with regards to how people access the music, but to be rude for a second, like how people like you get paid. I mean, this has been a big change.
Yeah. Well, that's really true. And that's one of the things that we don't always talk about when it comes to the pandemic. But, not to pivot too much from your question, which I'll answer, but like 90-ish% of our income right now comes from live music. So that's been really difficult during the pandemic as well. I think that I kind of got started during the streaming kind of popularity or rise of streaming, like you'd said, but it looked much different than it does today. YouTube is a streaming service, just not like we know today, like Spotify or Apple Music or, Amazon Music or however other many streamers there are. But YouTube was, and still is, obviously a music and a video streaming platform, but there was very much a music / YouTube artist, quote unquote, kind of genre. And I had been one of the lucky ones to fall into that and into that kind of group of YouTubers who all collaborated together. And, I'm really lucky that social media was such a huge part of my career back then, because although it has transformed, it's still a massive part of everybody's music career now.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's just absolutely huge. I'm always curious to see, where it's going to go. I think I'm not saying anything profound here, Jess, but I was one of those university students that was so proud of the big CD towers that I had on either side of my TV. You know what I mean? And like now, I know interior designers were always like, "Oh my gosh, it looks so horrible. Everyone has all their CDs on display." And now it's like I've got a 6-year-old, and he'll never really know what that was like, because they'll grow up with millions of songs and all content on demand on something the size of a credit card. I mean, it's just totally mind blowing. I can't even imagine where the industry is going to go. I mean, it's fascinating. And as an artist, you've got to be able to understand the industry side. I'm sure obviously you've got great management, but understand the industry side. And then also, put out great music, right?
Yeah.
Got to kind of do both.
It's a real thing. Yeah, it's really difficult. And not only that, but we kind of have to try and foresee what the future is going to be so that we can be not even necessarily ahead of the curve, but on it. It's kind of tough. There's, you talk about CDs and whether or not they're going to be a thing. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But what I do know is that when we're playing live shows, that's what fans want to buy. That's what they want signed as CDs. They don't want a little digital card that has the code that you can scan to go listen on Spotify, as cool as that can be, so it's a real conversation that we have to have every time we record music, is whether or not we're going to print physical copies.
You and I have a mutual friend. I love this. Last time you were in Edmonton, 8-time world champion boxer Jelena Mrdenovic posted this photo. She said, "I was so thankful for the friends I get the privilege to adopt via association." Thanks so much to Jess Moskaluke for coming out to the studio. You were at Champs Boxing Studio. Is boxing a big part of your fitness routine, or is that just a way to get a sweat in?
No, I'm so thankful for Jelena, like every day except that one. She kicked my butt that day. I think I might still be sore. No, that's not usually a part of my fitness routine. Every once in a while, I'll do like a kickboxing video or something, but I did have so much fun. And if I could do that more often, I absolutely would.
Right on. So you've got this show coming up. I'm talking about the one here in Atchison on the 9th. And I know then you're going to be heading, where you're off to Regina, October 16th for a show with the Regina Symphony Orchestra. That's going to be super cool. Is that something that, did you grow up listening to all different kinds of music?
No, I very much grew up listening to like mostly country. So, after that, kind of once I got into high school and university, I kind of went more of the pop route and the pop country route. So symphony music is something that's very new to me. My husband's a really big fan of it, which is interesting. And a new fact I've learned about him recently, but I am so excited for that show. It's going to be something so different. And I really can't wait to see how the orchestra kind of interprets songs that I've written. It's kind of a really cool full circle moment. And it only makes sense that the first one is right here in Saskatchewan. Hopefully there will be more.
Yeah. We're going to push back on your assertion. You don't believe that you're a star. You've got the hardware to prove it. You are. There's star, and then there's superstar, and then there's icon. And so I want to ask you about Shania Twain. You are the first Canadian female country artist since Shania to achieve CRIA platinum single status with your hit tune, Cheap Wine and Cigarettes. What does that mean? I mean, I know you've had a chance to perform alongside her. What does that mean to be in the same sentence as Shania Twain?
My gosh, anytime I even get comparisons to Shania, whether it's sonically or vocally or anything like that, I'm blown away and so humbled. But a sentence like that I hear so often because it's so cool, it never gets old. And I really can't believe that I, of all people, was the one that was able to do that. It's such an honor. She, you talk about icons, and she is my icon and role model. She's my favorite artist of all time. So it's definitely not something I ever pictured for myself.
Very cool. Well, listen, I know that a lot of people are excited about the show on October 9th. If tickets are still available, you can find them at tickets.sprucegrovesaints.ca. This is a really neat show. It's hockey sticks and honky tonk. It's a charity-driven initiative, a 2-show event, a Christmas toy drive. You can learn all the details online. It's a 4 p.m. show, Saturday the 9th. Again, tickets.sprucegrovesaints.ca. And, of course, make sure you tune into this year's CCMAs coming up on November 29th. We hope that there's some sort of an impact. Some of the people that have come on this show, authors, musicians, they've talked to us. They've gone on to win. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Jess, we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Thanks for that. That's Jess Moskaluke. Again, tickets.sprucegrovesaints.ca. Before we get to Eat Your Words, and I know that a lot of you have been looking forward to this week's edition because it's kind of been an obvious one. As a matter of fact, Hoyles, I don't think we've ever had as many Real Talkers reach out to us and tell us what was going to be on Eat Your Words, but it seemed like an obvious choice. First, I want to remind you that we have another feature coming up tomorrow. How's it going to be Friday tomorrow? This week has just absolutely flown by. Trash Talk, presented by our friends at Local Waste. We got a whole bunch of emails already, but we want more. We want more. We want to be able to put together the best damn trash talk you've ever heard. That means maybe some non-political emails, too. I want to challenge you, Real Talkers. What's something driving you nuts that has nothing to do with politics? You can send it to us, talk@ryanjesperson.com. Make sure you, in the subject line, note that it's for Trash Talk. It's presented by Local Waste. They've been with us since inception. They've been in the construction, commercial, and residential waste and recycling collection business for a quarter century. Still family-owned. Keep it local. Request a quote from Local Waste Services today via their website, localwaste.ca, or you can give them a call. Chris, Mikkel, Lauren at 306 in Saskatchewan, 306-992-9028. Shout out to our neighbors in Saskatchewan and out of Alberta. Capital City of Edmonton at 780-306-1282. At Westworld Computers, they've got the sales side, of course, the full Apple lineup that's kept their customers coming back for 40 years to the family-owned independent business, but it's their service department that I know has a lot of you keeping Westworld Computers front of mind when you're looking to upgrade your Apple products. They're an Apple authorized service provider, which means that all of their repairs are Apple certified and backed by Apple. We didn't script it yesterday. I thought that was amazing. All of a sudden, Sam chimes in, Sarah chimes in. They both had experience with the service providers, the service department at Westworld Computers. When you book your appointment online at westworld.ca, you make sure you let them know that you heard about them on Real Talk. Well, every Thursday, thanks to our friends at Prairie Catering, we offer somebody, or in some circumstances, several people, an opportunity to eat your words. And this week, the choice was simple. There's nothing funny or jovial about the healthcare reality in Alberta right now, nor across the country, but it's especially exacerbated in our home province, where ICUs are overrun, healthcare staffers are exhausted, the military's here to help out. Of course, that's not what was promised back in the middle of June when Alberta's Premier, Jason Kenney, and Alberta's then Health Minister, Tyler Shandro, took to the podium to announce the lifting of all restrictions just in time for July 1st, what was supposed to be the best summer ever. Robson Fletcher's done an amazing job through this pandemic for the CBC and for the general population, coagulating data, and in this case, creating an edit of that news availability. He's the one that put this video clip together. My, how things change over time. When it comes to something that did not age well, this video would certainly qualify.
The end of this terrible time is just 2 weeks away. I know it's, for some of us, hard to believe, but it's true. On July the 1st, Alberta isn't just open for summer, but I believe will be open for good.
Life will, in most ways, go back to normal. We're transitioning from a pandemic that changes everything about how we live to a virus that we control.
Some people will get sick. Regrettably, a few people likely will pass away, as has been the case forever with the flu, with influenza. We are going to be fully opening on Canada Day at a much higher level of epidemiological protection, of population protection, than anywhere else in the world that has opened up.
Doctors here, medical experts here, telling us they think we're basically ushering in a fourth wave because of the Delta variant.
With respect to the Delta or the B.1.617.2 variant, we still have only about 200 active cases, less than 10% of our total active cases.
So the amount of Delta cases right now is, as Dr. Hinshaw has made the point to me, this is her advice, that it's still statistically irrelevant.
At this stage of this, I don't think it's responsible constantly to be spreading fear. I've heard about CTV reports about that we're headed into the fourth wave, and some person on Twitter with their projections that we're going to be awash in Delta cases, forcing people into the hospitals. So the data is in. The global experience is clear. This is one of the most cautious plans in the world.
Is there a contingency plan? Is there a plan B if we reopen and we see the hospital numbers start to increase again? We see the R value start to increase again. Is it possible that the province has to pull back on the reopening, or is this in place permanently?
We just don't see that scenario. This, as I said, our intention, this is open for good, not just open for summer. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for nothing. Thank you very much, everyone. This is the most cautious plan in the world. We laugh so we don't scream, right? I mean, by the way, that's Bill Fortier, a good friend of mine. Lousy golfer, but a great dude. I'm just kidding. Bill's all right, and he's been doing a hell of a job through this pandemic, along with many of the other journalists that have been covering this and holding this government, including this slippery premier, to account. This is a virus we can control, says Minister Shandro. Jason Kenney says, sure, there will be some deaths, much like has always been the case with the flu. The Delta variant, statistically irrelevant. I think it's irresponsible for these journalists to continually spread fear. Names CTV by name. Is there a better billboard for CTV than that? I've been hearing that there's a CTV report that soon we'll be headed into a fourth wave and hospitals will be overwhelmed. That's what you call calling it. That's what you call being right. Has Jason Kenney been right about anything in the last year? I want to quote from Robin Urbach, who just put this out in the Globe and Mail yesterday. She's writing Jason Kenney's political obituary. If there's one thing to which Kenney's political demise can ultimately be attributed, it's hubris. A leader needs a degree of that fustian confidence to succeed in politics, to be sure, but his proclamations were so definitive. Alberta's oil boom is coming back. We will uncover foreign efforts to disparage Alberta's energy sector. COVID-19 restrictions are over. The end of this terrible time is almost here. Best summer ever. And on matters so crucial to both provincial identity and the well-being of the people of Alberta, that Kenney's failures weren't merely the typical unrealized promises of a bumptious politician. They became a series of betrayals that wounded the province deeply. It's going to take a while for Alberta to recover from Jason Kenney's tenure as premier, and I suggest we get that healing started as soon as possible. In the meantime, on behalf of our team, I'd like to invite Minister Tyler Shandro and Jason Kenney to Eat Your Words, presented by Prairie Catering, who right now, via their website at prairiecatering.ca, are taking orders for their fabulous pickup Thanksgiving dinner. That's right. You can go to prairiecatering.ca, click on Thanksgiving dinner, and leave the work to them. Plus, consider hosting your next business meeting or conference at the Art Gallery of Alberta. From their executive boardrooms to state-of-the-art theater, they can host up to 300 people. And if you mention Eat Your Words on Real Talk, they're going to give you 20% off your rental space at the AGA, valid for 2021 rental dates. Eat Your Words, presented by our friends at Prairie Catering. Robson Fletcher put that, what was that, about a 2-minute, 20-second clip together, and I'm watching my colleagues here in studio listen to it, and Hoyles, it looks to me, I was trying to figure out, you're trying not to, if I can offer my assessment through the plexiglass, you're trying not to burst out laughing, and you're trying not to burst into tears at the same time. Is that accurate?
Accurate, 100%. I mean, it's preposterous, it's ludicrous, it's awful. It's like just all, but the thing is about it is that everyone was saying even at that time, we should not be, taking off the guardrails. We should not be opening up the province, even at that time. Now, unfortunately, we have the proof of why everyone was saying that. We had evidence, and we had medical experts that were saying this is how. What was our math folk guest talking about yesterday about exponentiality?
Yeah,
like
I learned a little bit yesterday. I was like, "What's that?" I can't spell it, let alone know what it means. But yeah, that was a great point.
Yeah, and so the idea that we knew what was going to happen because of those medical experts. Now we just have the proof, which is death, lots of sickness, and quote unquote capacity issues.
Yeah, Tony says, you remember when the premier implied it was okay for seniors around 82 years old to die because the average age for death was a little bit lower than that? Would he sacrifice his mom? Tony says this guy's a sociopath. You remember that? He gets this like kind of smug grin on he gets this kind of like demure kind of smug smile when he talks. And he says, I'd like to remind people, that the average age of death due to COVID-19 is 82, which is kind of like, thanks for fighting in World War II, but it's now your time to go because my pals want to be able to reopen in time for the best summer ever. You got to wonder what this means. Sam, I don't know what people are talking about in your circles, but when you take a look at the Premier's polling right now, when you take a look at his approval ratings, people are saying, yeah, April, you've got a leadership review looming. But I mean, look at this. This is what we're talking about from Think HQ. These numbers are just a few days old. 6% of people polled, 6% strongly approve of Jason Kenney's job performance, while another 16% slightly approve, somewhat approve is the word they used, for a 22% approval rating, which is, I mean, not great, to say the least. 61%, I was trying to find a way. I mean, why am I trying to be gracious? I don't know why I'm trying to be gracious. That is horrific. That's horrific. That's worse than my men's league basketball team getting blown out by 41 points the other night. We didn't even score 41 points. We lost by more points than we scored. And Kenney's doing worse than my men's league basketball team. Yikes. That's brutal. Let's take a look at the numbers again, because when you take a look at the disapproval, this is where it becomes pretty significant. 61% strongly disapprove, another 16% somewhat disapprove, for a 77% disapproval rating. You can't write that off to dippers, commies, and socialists, as I know the Premier would love to do. That's a lot of problems within the base. So the question is, does he make it to April? Well, a lot of people are starting to throw some cash around on these over-unders with regards to when the Premier may have to, a la Alison Redford, walk out of a cabinet or caucus meeting and thank Albertans for their time.
You know, I think Jason Kenney is masterful at reminding his party how much he needs them. That's how he survived the last caucus vote. I mean, they did actually put a motion on the floor to have a confidence vote on him in caucus, and he kind of stamped that out. And I mean, what I've heard is basically, he wanted it to be not a secret ballot. He's just like, all right, show him. Yeah. Everybody who disapproves of me, stand up right now. And they all quietly fell in line.
But at some point, you lose that ground, right? At some point, that doesn't work anymore. You know, Robin Urbach's piece in the Globe is an interesting one, because she talks about what his political future might look like. I mean, she's sticking a fork in it. She says, with regards to the impact that Kenney had, not a positive one, on the federal Conservatives and how Aaron O'Toole probably feels about it right now, he may not be welcomed back with open arms to the federal caucus, right? He may not be the next one in line next time there's a by-election. He may not be brought in whatever role you may forecast. So that's something we're keeping an eye on. Before we go today, I wanted to remind you about a couple of other options that you have around Thanksgiving, because the time is upon us. And I know for a lot of people, this is the time of year where you want to be able to simply sit with your loved one, whether you're going to have a few family members over to sit around the campfire outside, or whether it's your tight family unit indoors. The team at Friesen Brothers wants to remind you that they have options that allow you to leave the work to their team of Red Seal chefs. There are 16 locations across the province of Alberta right now offering Thanksgiving dinners, the Pickup Ham Thanksgiving meal in particular. Really great food is meant to be shared. And this year's feature Thanksgiving dinner includes a roasted Valbella gammon ham, their mother dough dinner buns, which are phenomenal, sourdough stuffing, cranberry sauce, gravy, and then your choice of veggies, potatoes, salad. You customize it however you like. You can check it out online at friesen.com. And don't forget, a shout out to my pals Winston and John, who looked me in the eye and essentially implied I had betrayed them for not reminding them that the first of every month at Friesen Brothers is 15% off. I mean, Winston in particular tells me that I've cost him hundreds of dollars over the past year.
You personally, I love it.
I personally have cost him hundreds of... He's like, why, Jespo, why wouldn't you have told me it's 15% off any purchase over $75 from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. the first day of the month? I said, Winnie? I don't really call him that. Winnie, I'm going to make sure that I mention that every time I mention Friesen Brothers right here on Real Talk. Our friends at Park Power want to remind you that just like economist Blake Schaefer said yesterday, right now it makes sense to sign up for a fixed rate when it comes to your electricity, your natural gas. You can do exactly that today at parkpower.ca. You can compare rates, internet, too, and sign up is easy. You don't have to go through an awkward breakup with your previous or current provider. They'll do the work for you. And don't forget to let them know about that promo code when you sign up. 2021-Real Talk means $70 in your pocket. We'll wrap today's show with a shout out to our friends at Kubi Energy. I love the synergy here. You know, you get your solar panels installed by Kubi Energy. You get excess, your stored power. You're able to push it back to the grid. Park Power has a special incentive there. These two corporations are working together and working with us here on Real Talk. Kubi Energy is providing solar energy solutions to power your life. They are a full-service contractor. In other words, from the consultation to the installation, you only make one phone call or visit their website to kubienergy.ca. Tesla certified. journeyman installers at Kubi Energy. I'm looking forward to today's assignment. We're signing off a little early because I'm going to be checking in with a post-secondary class that wants to talk about the future of journalism. It's an honor, and I'll report back to you on how that goes tomorrow, Real Talkers. You're not going to want to miss our municipal election extravaganza. 5 out of the 5 top polling candidates for mayor in Calgary, 4 out of the top 5 in Edmonton will join us for 10-minute one-on-ones. Not to be missed. We'll talk to you then.